Say what?
Hello. Welcome back. It's time for Say What, where we hear from those connected to our industry about what's going on in our world of electrical apprenticeship. And that includes the topics that you suggest. So please keep them coming. I'm your host, Cindy Sandifer. So change. Let's talk about change. There's nothing more constant and very few things that we resist more than change. So change is defined as making different, altering, or modifying. It's replacing with something else, especially something of the same kind that is newer or better. It's substituting one thing for another. There's your Webster's dictionary definition of change. And I think that pretty much sums up life. We're constantly, there's difference, there's altering, there's modifications, we're replacing things. So if change is inevitable in all aspects of our life, how do we successfully navigate it? Particularly when the current gets a little rough. How do we navigate that? Where our guest today has experience with this very topic and is here to share her knowledge with us. So please help me welcome Gwen Cooper. Well, obviously, I've gotten to know you over the past few months. It feels like I met you in July at NTI. Yeah. And then I've gotten to know. So what I want to tell you to do is, can you say everything on here that you've ever said to me? Because it's all been so helpful.
You can prompt me if I have forgotten something.
Oh my gosh. But I figured, okay, I'm not going to try to introduce you to our listeners. So I'm going to let you go ahead and just give our listeners a little bit about who you are, what your background is, so that they'll know, who they're hearing from as we have this chat.
Yeah. All right. I'd love to do that. So my name is Gwen Cooper. I'm the founder of Cooper Solutions, LLC. And it's a leadership growth firm. I'm out of Northern California, but I work everywhere in the world. But I have a leadership growth firm, and I focus on helping leaders and teams develop and grow themselves as leaders, as individuals. And I also help organizations with their learning and development, with their change needs, and just the types of challenges organizations face in growing and adapting to the challenges in our world. So it's a lot about growth and development. And prior to that, I worked in learning and development. I worked in change consulting, and for 10 years, I was a clandestine officer in the CIA, in the Directorate of Operations, which is kind of out of left field, but I feel there are so many parallels and crossovers to the work I do now and what I learned there and what I knew before I went into the agency and what I applied there. So that's part of what we'll talk about today, I'm sure.
Perfect. Yeah, I know we've kind of joked, or I've joked with you about that if there's, any kind of profession or background that understands change, constant evolving, things always going on, working with people, it's like, okay, you say CIA and I'm like, yeah, okay, you know what you're talking about for sure.
Because the area I worked in the Director of Operations, is very much focused on the human element. So we were all about getting information from human sources. So not from technology, not from signals, not from, overhead shots or maps or cameras, or it was very much from human beings. So it was like that kind of interaction. How do you build relationships with people you seemingly don't have much in common with? And how do you build trust? And how do you gain insights? And how do you go in with a story you have in your head about a situation, but remain open to what you might not know or understand about it? So there's so much about that type of work that is relevant to the day-to-day and anybody's work environment when we're working with people.
I was just thinking that as you were saying that, you have this most of us have an idea, a notion, even because we've heard something or maybe just seeing that individual. And all of a sudden, our bias, happens behind the scenes, but we're connecting things that we don't even realize our brain is doing. And then, we formed something and it's like, okay, are we open or do we then close off and decide, okay, I know what I need to know?
Yeah, exactly. We're always creating stories. Our brain is wired for story, to create stories, to make sense of things, to put things into categories. And so we create a story about a person or a situation, and then the reality is, are we open to update that story? When we have conflicting information, are we remaining open to say, well, this is the story I've created so far, but I don't have the whole picture?
What do you think the resistance? So when we're resistant to changing the story or allowing more information, and is there something in that's we don't want to be wrong? Is that part of it? Like, I've already created this story. If I change it, then that means I was incorrect. I was flawed at some point in this. Is that part of it?
I think that can definitely play into it. So one of the things I'm doing right now along these lines, so I have to practice what I preach. If I believe in growth and development, I have to keep pushing myself. So one of the things I'm doing right now is pursuing a degree, an advanced degree in neuroscience and psychology. So when we look at how brains work, I mean, there is a part of that. There can be a part of that. Like, nobody enjoys being wrong. That's not a fun feeling, socially. But in reality, when we look at neuroscience and how brains form and how brains are functioning, our brains crave familiarity. We have neural networks that are formed, patterns and grooves that are formed in our brains when we have well-worn pathways of understanding and information. So we actually have grooves, as you can picture, like kind of like there's little resistance, like they're just worn in. It's like same information, no conflicting information. And we like that familiarity. It's easy. It's a little bit like being on autopilot. Like, we don't have to work so hard. Our brains don't have to work so hard. So then when we get different or conflicting information or new information, we have to work harder. Our brains have to work harder. And we're not on autopilot anymore. And I think that experience has so come to the fore for people, with the rapid change that's been taking place, with rapid changes in, when we look back at the last several years, like the situation with COVID, nobody got to be on autopilot anymore for almost anything. School, work, family relations, going to the grocery store was not on autopilot anymore, right? Everything had, like, you had to think about how you were doing everything. It's exhausting. So I think the resistance to change is, a lot of it is our brains craving familiarity. That's just how we're wired. Another part of it, I mean, we get more into the psychology of it. It's like we get to a certain stage in our lives, in our personal lives, in our professional lives. Like, we're proud of our experience and our knowledge, and the idea that is somehow threatened by the new information. Like, wait a minute, I'm the expert. Wait a minute, I'm the one who knows this, and suddenly there's new information that I don't know. That is jarring. That's a little bit of looking at having to look at oneself a little bit differently. Either you're looking at yourself a little differently, or you have to look at the value you bring differently, or both. And so, look, I want to dig into that a little bit, if that's okay, because I think there's
Please,
something
yes.
really important about this. And it's such a big part of the work I do with folks, because so many people come into coaching because they have gotten to a certain level, they've had a certain amount of success, And then they have new opportunities, or they want new opportunities, and they have to develop skills that weren't asked of them before. So they find themselves in this position. It's like, I'm very successful at what I do, and I'm being rewarded with coaching to prepare me for this next role. So, for example, quite often I have people who are really great individual contributors, like just rock stars. And now they're being asked to take over a team. So there's a very famous leadership coach called Marshall Goldsmith, and he wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that's exactly what this is about. It's like there are the skills that got you to a certain point, but now there's a pivot, and you need to develop different skills to get to the next one. And so what if we don't grow as individuals, if we don't shift how we see ourselves and our experience, we can get stuck in the identity of the rock star, the individual. For example, in this scenario, I'm the individual rock star. And if I am that person and I can't shift my thinking to say, okay, I'm really good at this. Now I want to get good at this other thing, and allow myself to be a learner again, and allow myself to make mistakes and not be an expert. If I don't allow myself to do that, I'm going to have a really tough time transitioning to the next level, or becoming an expert or very knowledgeable in something else.
Mm. Yeah, you like all of this just resonates so much. And I know you and I've talked about this some, but within our industry, it's ever evolving. I mean, when you think of the electrical construction industry, and I feel like every day I'm learning something else that is a part of the industry that I didn't necessarily connect to. And I'm like, oh, I guess that does fit in the realm of what, our industry and our organizations, participate in. You'd mentioned trust earlier. And I was thinking, wow, that's such, trusting yourself, trusting those around you, trusting the path forward. There's so many things. And a lot of times we don't, or in fact, probably most of the time, we don't know everything. We don't know the discussions that are happening. We don't know what's on the horizon. So there's a trust factor along with this change that our brain is like, no. Like, I liked my autopilot. I liked, it's that time when you get in the car and you're not even thinking, you don't even know how you got to where you were going.
But you knew. It was like muscle memory. It's the well-worn pathways in the brain. It's like autopilot. I'm going to this place. I've done it a million times. Yeah.
I'm here.
It's comfortable. It's almost relaxing.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what we face, whether it's someone on the job site, someone in a classroom, someone, in a leadership role, just you've got that you can do, how to do it. It works. It's always worked. But then we start getting into, we do it this way because we've always done it. And you just pointed out that you can't get to the next place just doing
by the
it
way you've always done it.
Right.
Which is not to say that that's not valuable information. It's not as if we just write that off. So I do a lot of work in the energy world. So I work with utilities. I work with your organization. I work with utilities. I work in oil and gas. And so what's very similar across the board is that there is exponential technological change occurring in these industries. And so what came in the past is not irrelevant, not by a long shot. It's still extremely relevant, but it's in the improvisation world, there's when people are working together doing improv, it's always yes and. People are doing something, and then another person in the group says yes and. And so it's that spirit really in this situation as well. It's like, yes, that's important, that's still relevant, and there's a lot on the horizon that's not yet so well defined that needs exploration. And there's a lot of, from a competitive place, there's a lot of the value add in organizations when they have a competitive technology edge. But there's a lot of human thinking and problem solving and problem definition that goes into coming up with an innovative solution. And so there's a professor at Darden University. His name's Ed Hess, and he's written a book. It's maybe 4 or 5 years old now, but it's called the New Smart. And he's looking at like what does smart really mean? What does expertise and intelligence really mean in the environment we were just describing? And it's really about, I have a quote here. I'm just pulling up because I want to make sure that if it's a quote, that I'm saying exactly the way he said it. It's not paraphrasing, it's actually the quote. But it's actually his hyper learning. It's the New Smart. He calls it the New Smart. But he said, I am not defined by what I know or how much, but the quality of my thinking, listening, relating, and collaborating. So I'm going to say that again because it's a lot. But
yes.
Yeah, I am not defined by what I know or how much, but the quality of my thinking, listening, relating, and collaborating. So this is like, yes, there's the expertise and the knowledge, but a lot of the expertise that can be leveraged now is not merely what's been memorized or what exactly has been done in the past. It's how people are able to take what they know and what they've done and adapt it into a new context, and how they're able to think about it, put it into a new context, how they're able to listen and build trust and build relationships with other people. So they're actively listening, they're relating to people, we're talking about and learning from each other, collaborating. So we're practicing. So with thinking, we're practicing curiosity, we're asking open-ended questions, we're asking for other people's opinions, and we're leaning on other people's experience.
Yeah, like I felt as I was listening to you do the quote twice, especially because I did need to soak it in again, it's like there's a freedom in it. Now, not to say knowledge isn't important, not saying expertise doesn't have, like, we shouldn't just stop learning and say, well, I don't have to learn anymore.
Quite the opposite.
Right. But to say like...
I'm almost always in a course. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no.
I'm almost always in a course or some type of professional development personally, because there's so much I want to expand my own thinking in order to serve my clients. It's like there's no shortage of opportunities and possibilities. Sorry, please continue.
No, but that second part of the quote, and I don't want to, but what were the things, if you still have it up, like
I do. I absolutely
do. The last part, the things that he said, what were those?
Thinking, listening, relating, and collaborating.
So when I think about that, right, any of us can do it. Now, for some, it's harder. Like some of us may be great thinkers. It does, we like to ponder and really sit back and reflect, where other people might not have that kind of naturally, but we can all become thinkers and listeners and collaborators and relate. And so I, again, feel like this freedom, like I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be the expert. Nobody's going to be the expert in everything. Nobody's going to know everything.
Is it even possible?
Exactly.
For one, I mean, is that even a realistic goal to shoot for?
Right. And it's not. And so it's like this idea that, wow, just everybody can be a part of that, the thinking, the listening, right? The collaborating, relating. And it just, I don't know, for me, again, it's like, wow, there's so much power in that. And then we all get better, if we're doing that part. And then change, even the hardest parts of change become different. They don't have quite that resistance. There's still some, but I don't know. I feel like if you're really opening yourself to that, it's different.
Yeah, and when I was at the agency, I was I was an officer. I went through the ops training. I did all that. Spent time overseas. But one of the ways I contributed, it's like my personal value system. When I look at why I choose the opportunities I choose and why I do the work I do, I like to find ways to contribute. Um, and so I think about it in those terms. And so when I was there, because before I entered, I had a background in uh, learning and development and training and adult development. And then I went into the agency. So it was an unusual combination of skills to have somebody who was a trained operations officer who also had a background in training and adult development. So I moved into the training area. So I thought, okay, I've been trained, I've done the work, and now I can help in the training realm. So when I went through the training, I noticed there weren't enough opportunities to be having these types of conversations with the trainers. This, like, I'm listening, I'm thinking, I'm listening, I'm trying new things, and I wanted to talk through, okay, so here's how it went in training, but what about if we put it into this context or this country I lived in? Then what do you do? Or, like, I felt that was the way to really learn, because make it personal, make it your own, try and figure out how that would work outside of a training situation. I mean, it's as realistic as we all try to make training. There are, like, what if questions are really important. So that was uh what I noticed, is that it was still. And so when I went through training, it was late 90s. Even at that point, late 90s, the focus on the training was still very much steeped in Cold War threats and Cold War thinking and Cold War tradecraft. But I knew, and as many others did, we had a lot of newer, different threats on the horizon. And so going through it with my training perspective and also that lens, it's like, okay, so when are we going to talk about our practice, or even have a lecture on how do we adapt this for what's coming? And so that's what I felt. That's the way I felt I could contribute. So what I did with some other folks there and some external consultants too, because it was a big project, was spend time in a research project looking at how do we define current state and kind of what we see on the horizon, the threats to our officers, in order to adapt and update the training. There were folks who were experts in their field, who had long histories with the agency, who were trainers, and some of them were like, "Oh yeah, that'd be great. We really need to update this." Some of them thought that, or believed that meant that they would be out of jobs, and that it was this idea that your expertise is not going to be relevant, when we all thought it was a yes. And it was like, that is relevant. And how do we take what you know and your experience, and how do we also adapt that to be looking at what's coming? So what we did, we spent a lot of time. It was a lot of time in the thinking, being curious. Like, we're not going to make any assumptions about what's out there. We're going to let other people. So we had interview processes, very open-ended interview processes, where we were curious, like, tell me about it. Tell me about your situation. What are the biggest concerns you have in this environment? Tell me about a time when. an operation went really well. Tell me, open-ended questions. So thinking, listening. Tell me about a time when an operation didn't go so well. What happened? What was the impact? What would you have done differently looking back at it now? What do you still feel you could use more information on, or more better insights into? And so relating, then we ask for their opinions. Like, what would have made training better for you? What was great about training to begin with? And then the collaborating, we were leaning on others' experiences to tell us what was going on. So we kind of, looking back, like, we used that approach to learn, to test our own assumptions about what we thought was going on, and then to bring that information back from the field, from people who were there now living it, to update the training approach.
Right, which helps move away from group think, where everybody is we're just all going to, it's exactly what it sounds like for those that haven't maybe heard that term, but you're just all thinking alike, right? We're just going to go with what is typically like the status quo, or one person says it and we're just going to go with that. Maybe they're the leader or the boss, maybe they're not, but we just jump on board. And that's why you do need, to your point, for that, those individuals that were maybe a little nervous that, okay, you don't need me now because you're moving forward to something else. It's like, no, we absolutely need you, so that we don't just move into something different or new and forget what exists, what works.
Well, what's working, what's still foundational and fundamental to the work itself, and what are the new perspectives. It could be similar or slightly tweaked tradecraft practices for an environment, but and I think this is similar to so many of the industries, and the clients that I have, is that in the intelligence world and in their worlds, there's a physical safety element to what's going on. So there's putting people at risk. How do we make sure we are minimizing risk to people, and that they're not putting themselves in situations where they will be harmed, other people might be harmed? And so when we were first bringing back some of the ideas from the field, we were saying, well, this is some of what we're learning. And they're like, well, I think that, we would get responses like, well, I think the training's fine. I mean, nobody's been killed, and there aren't. I was like, well, yeah, thank God. And are we waiting for that to happen?
Right. Is that the measure of needing to change?
Thank you, because I don't love that. I don't love that for our people. I don't. Right. Yeah, I'm not excited about that measure.
Yeah, who do you sacrifice in that moment?
Yeah, it's like, who's going to step up? No,
right.
I'll take the hit.
Yeah, sure. No big deal. Well, what you're saying, because our industry, as I mentioned, whether it's the job site or the classroom lab space, there's going to be change, because, again, new things are becoming a part of the work that we do. We realize that, old ways have their foundation. As you pointed out, they have things that we need to keep. And we also need to improve upon and make things better without sacrificing safety, without sacrificing knowledge, and the things that we know are fundamental to the electrical worker, and those that are in this field. And so as you were talking about it, it's just, and we've, the journey, if you go back to when we had 3-ring binders, full of papers, and that's what they had. Then it went to workbooks, and then workbooks went to this blended learning of paper and digital. And so as we're evolving and changing, it is tough. There's just no doubt that because the classroom / lab space, that becomes different. The job site becomes different, what we're teaching and learning. And so you're talking about a lot of people who have to adjust to that. And is there a formula? And that's probably not a fair word, but like, to deal with change, so as we sit here knowing that we have no choice, it's change is what the most constant thing in the world. Is there a way to like kind of break it down to help us, all of us, right? When the smooth pavement in the brain isn't, we're not
Yeah.
tracking on that.
I think, yeah, I was thinking about this in particular because, being a human being, even though I work in this field, I don't love it when change comes at me and I'm not in the mood for it. I don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get resistant, I get cranky, I like dig my heels in. It's like, ugh, is this really necessary?
Yes. That's
Like,
me.
God, and
Yeah.
one more thing. I don't just today, for example, and I've not forgotten your question, but just to make this relatable, like just today, I was so I'm in a friend's home today, and I was setting something up, and I was moving back, and I just thought I'm just gonna leave my phone upstairs because I'm doing something down here, and I have my laptop, and so of course there's something I want to enter into, and I needed, it was like another code, right? I'm like, I can't go anywhere without my phone anymore. My life does not allow it, and I resent that. I really is like, I would like to walk away from my phone for 15 minutes or half an hour and not have to engage with it.
Mm-hmm.
It just, it hardly ever happens. So
Yeah.
I don't know why that is gotten really annoying and triggering for me. I guess I'm trying to carve out a little more time where it's just quieter space. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, even when I'm doing some small thing, it's like, no, I have to take my phone everywhere. And I guess I have to. So going back to your
Yeah.
question, I think when I look at what my own personal experience and the work I do has taught me about change, is when it comes down to it, I have a huge role in how I experience it. Me as an individual, I have a huge role in how I experience it. Because what is happening and what is being asked of my brain impacts emotions, impacts those reactions and feelings. And I have to actively seek other interpretations. So that is one of the biggest things, like, okay, I have to find a better way to manage this for me.
Right.
And that I mean, honestly, that is the starting point.
Yeah.
Nobody can do it for me. Nobody's going to make the phone situation work this in enhanced security. It's my trade-off for enhanced security,
Mm.
is that I need my phone, I need it for codes, I need it for just about everything. And that's the choice I have made in having enhanced security for things, is that I need my phone all the time.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, I don't love it. And it's like, okay, but it's my appraisal of situations that I can control and that I can revisit, and I can look for other ways to interpret the situation, other messages to be sending myself, instead of I hate my phone and I don't want to carry it everywhere. I could just stay on that loop forever. But what's it going to give me? Just, I'm just going to reinforce my own frustration. I'm going, like, if I look at it and say, okay, what am I really wanting, that I'm finding the phone to be my problem? Like, I'm trying to carve out more time in my day where I'm not attached to screens. It's like, well, then I probably shouldn't be like on my laptop because that's a screen too. So like, I'm creating a weird situation by saying I don't want a screen, I'll leave my phone here. But in reality, I'm trying to use my laptop. So I'm creating some frustration for myself. So it is that, like, slowing down, stepping back and saying, okay, what's happening here? What's my current interpretation of this situation? What's an alternative way of looking at it? What's my role in what I'm doing and how I'm looking at it, which isn't fun, because in reality, in this situation, I'm being a goof because, like, okay, that's a screen too. So what do you think you're saving here? Like,
Right. Right.
like, so
Yeah.
there's a little breakdown in logic there. Um, but that I have found, that's all, in the end, that's all I tend to control. I don't control other people. I don't control time and space. But and selfishly, I want to control my own peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so this practice helps me get at that.
Yeah. And I think
And it's
better
easier sometimes than others. Sorry.
no, and that exactly. And it depends on the situation and circumstance. And I think that's why it's so important for us to understand ourselves, understand our brains. Not that we're all going to go, seek the degree that you're doing, but this
No,
idea,
that's
we'll
maybe
just
extreme.
ask you later, right? But to better understand, because I don't know that we are always thinking about our brain. And recognizing, like, why am I? Is this something that's just going to happen because it's the way I am made, like it's my makeup? But this idea of, okay, there's this thing that I can't control, which really we don't control much. It's us and it's the moment of time we're in. There's really nothing we can do about the past. We can learn from it, but we can't change it. We really, we can influence the future, but there's no way to actually go in yet, at least that I know of, time traveling. So, there's just so much about right now, this moment. And if we decide to focus on the negative, if we decide to focus on the things we can't control, then I'm assuming we're doing things in our brain. We're creating these moments, and then that's affecting our emotions, our logic. Yeah. And then we're passing that on to anybody that's hearing or in our space, right? That's feeling that.
We're going back to this idea of story. We're creating a story and we're doubling down on it if we're not exploring it.
And so if we
resist,
resist,
my phone is my biggest enemy.
Right.
My phone is my biggest problem. Like, I don't think that's really it.
I like the amount of examples I have for myself, because I feel like I am a creature of habit. I am her. That is me. I have to accept that. And so all the different things that can totally throw me off simply because it really is about control when I get down to it, but it's not what I expected, or it's messing up my agenda, my plan, whatever I had. And I mean, something as simple as traffic. Like, I'm stuck in traffic. I can't do anything. So I can sit here and, cuss and fuss. I can complain. Yeah. And I am not changing anything. Nothing changes, right? And it's like, if I learn that, okay, this particular road during these times of day, then I can find an alternate path if I have to take that route consistently. Or in a situation, say you're traveling and you just hit traffic and you're stuck, it's like, maybe I could listen to something, that's either positive or that makes me laugh, something to put me in a different frame of mind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's also recognizing kind of what are the things that are going to trigger me, and then going back to this thinking, like, and being curious about, okay, that really bugs me. Like, what is it about that that gets me really wound up and makes it really hard to be curious? Like, it's kind of like, okay, like it's looking at reactions as data points. Like, wow, all right, what's that reaction about? Like, what if we dig into that? What am I actually thinking in that moment? What am I telling? What's the story I'm telling myself?
Yes. Because I've always said I've read this somewhere, I cannot remember where, but the voice we believe and trust the most is our own, because we've known it for the longest and it's been with us, and it's, from our perspective, at least, in what, it's been true and verified that it's there, it's going to always be there. And so if we're telling ourselves something, we're believing it.
Oh, yeah.
And so just as I'm thinking through, okay, so we've established that changes happens, it's going to happen, it's not stopping. We've established that our industry is going to constantly evolve and be changing. So what happens? I mean, what are we looking at? Like if we're like, nope, I don't care about change. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to accept it. Like, what's that going to do to us as individuals and the progress of our industry? I mean, I don't even know if that you can. I really am thinking about it. I'm like, the person that just won't change is probably going to be eventually like possibly out of a job because they're not keeping up with where things are going. But at least like what would be that impact of saying, nope, just don't want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a type of self-sabotage. Even if you stay in your job, um, the relationships around you start to disintegrate because other people are most likely trying to figure it out. You might have some company for a while, but what I've seen when I've worked in change consulting, and we've been trying to, the organization has wanted to implement a technology change or a process change or merger acquisition. Some big change. Like people aren't excited about it. I mean, I've been in organizations where there were changes, and I was like, I'm not in the mood. But those people who really resist and like go to bat for resisting, they don't stay because they've created, there's momentum for this move and it's happening one way or another, and they don't stay. They choose to leave, or they've created such a situation where they're digging in so much that they're not performing. It's pretty sad because we're not talking about bad people.
Right. Right.
It's really quite sad what I've seen. We're talking about, quite often there's a level of fear, anxiety. It's a threat. It's something that didn't have to happen that way, and it's quite sad, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. I was thinking as you were talking about the situation, I guess it was at the CIA where the training and you're looking at, what needs to happen, what needs to change, what should stay, so you're doing this research, you're testing it. And I think now, not to say there aren't people that do change just for change's sake or, just like, hey, we should try this. And then they go for like, I'm not suggesting that doesn't happen, but I think overall, a lot of times when a corporation, organization, industry decides to go a certain direction, they're doing that because of research, data, things that they're seeing on the horizon, what they know is coming that not everybody's going to know. And so I think that we're back to trust, maybe, is that change is coming. And oftentimes we don't have control over the change. So we have to, we have to adjust. And so it's not done frivolously. It's not done to harm anyone or to make anyone's life more difficult. This is going to happen. And if we're not ready, we're getting left behind.
Yeah.
So, or in your situation, people could die. I mean, you're talking about a situation where there are people in the field that if we don't make these adjustments, their lives are in danger.
They're unprepared for what's facing them.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think there a couple of thoughts I had when you were sharing that, because it so resonates with my experiences. Part of the challenge is the risk aversion factor in any organization. So sometimes people are drawn to organizations because they are secure and stable and they don't change very much. Like you were saying, you're a creature of habit. Mm-hmm. Like, well, people are drawn to organizations quite often because there is this stability. And so it's even harder when those organizations face significant change, because that's not what people were attracted to when they joined. But the other side of the coin is the change is coming and organizations are doing their best to prepare for it in advance and minimize the pain because it is a pay now or pay later experience because it's going to happen. So we do it incrementally, we're thoughtful, we plan for it, we make the changes slowly over time, or we do it all at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's chaos, and there will be some winners and some losers and some survivors, and
It's like the Band-Aid, right? Like I'd like to, make it a little bit easier to take off.
yeah. So that's the idea. It is the doing it slowly, but yeah, it's never easy. It's never easy. I mean, honestly, there are changes I have signed up for myself that weren't necessary. And then I've gone, why am I doing this? Why
Yeah.
did I choose? Why did I think this was a good idea? So, and I'm, I have a higher risk tolerance than some people, and I like novelty. And still, there are times when I have entered into something and thought, who did this to me? I did this to me. What am I thinking? Why did I make life so complicated?
And then also there's the, you're risk averse or change averse. And then you realize, oh, this did make it easier. And I can think back again, we're back to telling on myself, but going from, this paper system for something when I was working at at a JTC, we had a paper system that we kept records of. And then we moved to a software, and the move was like, oh, because I'm learning something new. You've got to get all this data put in. Yeah. But man, the difference, once it was done, once I was more familiar, time saved alone. And then there would be something new else, that we would move to, right? We're moving to this online application process or this new way of reporting work hours. And at first, there's this challenge that comes with the new, and my brain was just fine, right, with its worn paths of how I was doing it. But then once I'm in and once I'm doing it, it's like, oh, that was it. Like, it's that easy. And so, again, it's those moments, whether it's change we've taken on ourselves or that's been in some ways we can feel pushed or forced upon us. A lot of times, once those, I would assume, once those grooves, right, and you start wearing it down, then you're back to feeling comfortable and familiar and,
Exactly. That's exactly in your story. It's what I was picturing. It's like you went from being an expert, being on autopilot, to now here's a new way of doing it. It's like, I don't even understand my own job right now, which is a horrible feeling.
Yes.
But you do, because you have the previous expertise. It's just like, I need to learn how to do my job with this particular tool and process.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So what would you, like, as we're kind of wrapping up, I guess, what would be some last words, right, that you would leave us with, parting words to, as we're facing changes? It's 2024. Our industry is growing, it's developing, technology is coming. There's so many different things going on. What would you, leave to our listeners, just something to maybe think about or to help them face change?
I think it's especially working in change and education and development, which is your organization, and I do that having knowledge and experience and being able to share that with people is a wonderful thing, and it's great. And also leaning into the vulnerability of, I don't know everything. It's like, and I'm human too. And so that's okay. It's okay for everybody at every stage of their lives to be a learner. And I think we don't always allow ourselves to do that. And that is the best thing we can do for ourselves. I think it's the best example we can show for other people.
That's excellent, especially with the world of apprenticeship. It's like, that's what we talk about, is being lifelong learners. So it's we don't want to be the hypocrite that's like, but I don't want you to learn. I want you to learn, but not me. So I think that's brilliant.
It's for all of us.
Yes.
all the time.
Absolutely. Well, Gwen, I truly cannot thank you enough. You are magnificent. I love your experience, your knowledge. Just really thank you for being with us. And I'm sure it will not be the last time.
Oh, good. I look forward to the next time. But thank you so much for having me. I love your organization and everything you're doing. And yeah, just really enjoyed our conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm not going to suggest that I'm completely ready for tons of changes in my life, but it was certainly for me, this episode was a bit more eye-opening, making me more curious and open. So I hope you're feeling like that as well. Professionally, personally, whatever it did to resonate with you about change, because again, it's just one of those things that we all face every day. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience with us. We really, really appreciate it. And big thanks to you, the listeners, for hanging out with me, taking time to join and listen. And remember, we want to hear from you, things you want us to talk about. If you want to be a guest and share some things with us, send us an email, saywhat, SAYWATT, at electricaltrainingalliance.org. Our next episode will drop in November. Until then, stay connected with our newsletters, social media, subscribe to the podcast, tell somebody about it. Help them with their change, right? Anyway, all right, y'all, stay powered up, and we will see you next time.
Say what?